It has been 1 full year since the PlayStation Plus relaunch, where it's now a multi-tiered service with new options being extra, premium, or deluxe depending on where you live. And so let's do a deeper dive on just how well Sony did for that first year. So, how many games did they add, the quality of those games, PS Plus Premium's classic games, also the trials, the streaming. Let's really dive into what is going to be an assessment of Sony's first year on this renewed service on PS4 and PS5. So right off the top, we got a lot of games in year one for PS Plus Extra, and this was something we could notice almost immediately because the first month that they added games to the service, which would have been July 2022, we saw they added 16 games to Extra, with one of those being a day one launch title, that was Stray, the 2022 Game of the Year, but that was substantially more than what we had for PS Now, where on a monthly basis we were getting 3-4 games at the most. PlayStation Now was very much on its last legs. A skeleton crew was curating that content near the end there, and so that's why the relaunch made so much sense, where they basically took that library, cut it in half, and added it to PS Plus, where there's now 3 tiers. But overall, for the past 11 months, because I'm actually filming this right before they announced the June 2023 PS Plus Extra games, but in total, 154 titles were added to the game catalog, and some highlights there would be PS Studio games like Horizon Forbidden West, Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection, Sackboy Big Adventure, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. There were also day one titles in there, so Stray, Chia, Humanity, those all launched into PlayStation Plus Extra. Then there's other high-profile recent games like Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo, The Quarry, Life is Strange, True Colors, Outriders, Kena Bridge of Spirits, Rainbow Six Extraction, Back 4 Blood, and there's a lot more. You can see the range from the titles that are listed, and you can also see the Metacritic average of all these games on a monthly basis. And that's something where I want to stress, don't focus too much on that. It's just to get a rough idea of, the general quality of these games. Or really what we're making sure of is just that the average is not coming out to something a little bit weird or alarming like 50 or lower. That would be pretty strange, although if it's an average, of course, some games might be able to tank it pretty low. But we can see that across the board, it's not that. And that is the good thing, because subscription for games, they are consumed in a much different manner compared to TV, film, music. You can get through a lot of that content. And so, you can listen to a bad album and not worry about your time being wasted. People can work through multiple episodes that they might not care for, TV show, this and that, right? The content is consumed in a much different way for other mediums. Games, it doesn't matter how many titles Sony adds. Most people are not going to play the amount of stuff that they're adding, but the allure and the appeal of subscription for games is that you get to try out a number of things, and sometimes try things that you may not necessarily have thought would have been appealing based on a review score of 70. Some of my favorite games out there have scored quite low, so I know a lot of folks do nowadays harp on these 90+ scores, but obviously if the average for a lot of these games are coming out to that, 65, 70, 80 range, that's a great way to try out a number of things. So we can see across the board Sony has been doing quite well with the kind of titles that they've been adding. We also had a very interesting thing back in October where they added Assassin's Creed Chronicles and also Syndicate. Those games have problems when played on PlayStation 5 through backwards compatibility, but they all received patches to address their graphical artifact issues on PS5. That was good to see. And also, this was sort of a separate thing recently, but also Shadow of the Colossus was fixed as well. That is on PS Plus Extra. I think that was just their day one as part of the relaunch, but that game had some weird texture issues where it would just they wouldn't load in nearly as fast. Weird little, not game-breaking issue, but they did address that recently as well, so that was good to see. So, overall, when we're talking about PS Plus Extra, and this has been the general sentiment for the entire year, as we saw as the months went by, where they were adding so many games, good games, the kind of titles that, you want to jump into right away, right? Or something you've been meaning to try, or you were about to buy it, but now it's on Extra. I think the value is absolutely there. There is so much good stuff. Extra has been really great so far. But when we get to PS Plus Premium and Deluxe, there's a lot more scrutiny, and for good reason, but we should always be mindful of the price delta between Extra and Premium, where it's not that much more to upgrade. And so, we see how Sony, did this, right? They're a business, they know what they're doing. They have more Premium subscribers than Extra, because for most people that were seeing a prorate fee at the time, so it's even less than the $20 difference on a yearly basis, but, you know, seeing a prorate fee, a lot of folks decided, okay, I will upgrade all the way to premium just to try it out. So there are a lot of people subscribed to PS Plus Premium, but one of the most alluring things about that tier, certainly to me and a lot of others, is the classic games. And this is where we can speak in totalities here, because day one they launched with new PS1 and PSP titles, a brand new emulator, and they were not adding a whole lot throughout the year. So in total, throughout the, well, since day one, I should say, we have 21 PS1 games, 14 PSP titles for 35 new classic games in total, and those are the only new titles, because we have 24 existing PS2 games. They're still on there. We have not seen a single new PS2 game, which we've talked about this before, but as a quick recap, the problem there is that not only does the emulator have problems on PS5 when played through backwards compatibility, because these titles are technically coded and title ID'd as native PS4 games, they don't run all that well. There's very obvious graphical artifacting and issues going on when played on PS5 that Sony has still not addressed. There's also an exploit for some of these PS2 games. They're one of the few titles that have JIT privileges on PlayStation 5 in particular, meaning there's an exploit to access and, well, break open and access the emulator and then run PS2 ISOs, which, you know, Sony likely is not too thrilled with. So it's something where I've always assumed they are building a brand new PlayStation 2 emulator to address both those problems, but also make it feature complete with the PSP and PS1 emulators that have the video presets, the rewind, save states. So that's why we have not seen a brand new PS2 game in 11 months so far, but I do hope they will announce the new emulator eventually, sooner rather than later, ideally. Now, there's also the remasters section, so these two are various PS1, PSP, even PS3 games, but they're proper native PS4 ports. Many of these were released during the PS4 cycle. They usually had a remastered moniker attached to them because that's what they are. There's 55 of these in total. We didn't really see this move too much. They added a few games, but nothing crazy. And then PS3 was also, in terms of the total games, largely unchanged. Some did leave, but day one was like 319, I think, and there might have been some weird duplicates in there or something, but 319, the count today is 318. The only weird thing is we had some turnover with some games going down, but a lot of the titles Sony removed were first-party games, and then they added them back, you know, prior to the PS Now changing, right? So they, you know, the Sly Collection was lost from the PS Plus relaunch, then they added it back. That was just, I still can't believe they did that, but, you know, in theory, we still have not seen like a brand new PS3 game get added for what are a bunch of ancient PS3 server blades they made, you know, nearly 10 years ago for what was previously PlayStation Now. But that's been unchanged. That, and of course, all the PS3 titles have to be streamed. So that is the other perk to PS Plus Premium. Now, if you're in a deluxe territory, you don't have this, and that's why that service will be slightly cheaper than Premium, you know, adjusted for the territory. But Premium, you can stream all the PS3, but also most other titles in the game catalog, which this perk we can kind of move by because it's one of those things where it's not a very good experience, especially when you benchmark it to other options out there, right? So Stadia, before it closed, was a more enjoyable experience. Same for what Microsoft is offering, or NVIDIA GeForce Now. What Sony has in place is still not really all that great. So if you never had a good experience streaming games on PlayStation Now, it's the same service with a new name, the same server blades. You're still connecting to the same, all the same equipment. It's still from Amazon Web Services. Just what Sony has in place right now is not good enough. And that's why we do have rumors about them finally adding PlayStation 5 server blades, because the only thing you can't stream is PlayStation 5 titles. So perhaps they will have a new, more aggressive rollout, which Jim Ryan has been hinting to, but we can sort of leave that there for now. The other benefit is the PlayStation Plus game trials, which really something I have not messed around with too much, but you know, can't really discount this, right? It certainly is a very nice perk where for a handful of titles at any given time, they don't add a lot of these, but when they do, there's normally a trial on there for a recent game or a high-profile game, like right now Hogwarts Legacy is on there. It's not a very long trial, but based on the length of the game, you're downloading the entire full title, you're playing it unlocked with trophy support, the same save file. It's just that there is a timer on your play session where once you're done, then you'll have the option of, say, buying it later if you enjoyed the experience. It's a good perk, you know, something where I'm not sure how much value one would really place on it, but when we do consider the price delta overall, that's something where, you know, Premium has gotten a lot of flack in the past year. I'm part of it, right? Complaining a lot about it, but you know, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just there's more that can be done here. Obviously, I would like to see more classic games offered, and that's even considering how classic titles do present an issue nowadays, and that times are different. They can't necessarily secure the same licenses and the same games that they did for PSP and PS3 years ago. Some licenses are in a different position. The publisher may have different plans and may not be receptive to offering the game again on PS4, PS5. You know, we see this problem across the board, right? So with Nintendo, Microsoft also flat out admitting that they're kind of tapped out for their own backwards compatibility program, right? So there are unique challenges at play here. Just I would like to see a little bit more for the classic titles. Although, you know, credit where it's due, Sony did do a small amount here that they've actually gone back to those titles and re-add trophies to the ones that they launched without trophies. So that was super cool. Was never expecting it, but you know, nice to see them do it for their own titles with a small amount of third-party support. So maybe the next 11-12 months will be a little bit better there with some PS2 games finally. You know, Premium is kind of it makes sense, I guess, for how much little more they're asking, right? So I know we've been pretty harsh on that particular tier, but it's not all bad. It's just kind of, you know, if you know you're going to use some of those things on there, then you can't really, it's not too bad for what you're paying. Now, just as a kind of round out to the entire thing, you know, how many titles in total are we talking about here if you subscribe to PlayStation Plus Premium today? So here in North America, the library has grown to a decent size. So on day one, my original count, and that did include, you know, little duplicates of PS4 and PS5 titles on the same screen, but it was around 779 titles. Right now, it's just a hair over 900, which is also considering that titles do leave on a regular basis. It seems like every month about 10 to 15 titles will leave. Like right now, about 15 titles are going to leave, right? So it is a rotating cycle that we have. It's not necessarily something where the service may hit over 1,000, or if it needs to hit over 1,000. As long as there's a good cycle of rotating titles that stay on the service for, you know, long term, about 1.5 to 2 years, sometimes longer, depending on the deals Sony can work out, you know. It's a lot of games, more than most people will ever be able to finish in a reasonable amount of time, right? So it's more about having cool stuff there that you can jump into and try out. And, you know, again, it was cool seeing Sony outline this in their recent business segment briefing. So there is 8 million PS Plus Premium subscribers and 6.1 million on Extra. So more people are opting for Premium, which, you know, we can see how much better this already is being received from, you know, prior when it was PlayStation Now. You know, the last official PS Now number we had was back in March 2021, which was 3.2 million, and those were all grandfathered into PS Plus Premium, so keep that in mind for the Premium number, which, you know, a lot of those subscribers may finally be nearing the end of their subscription if they didn't buy up a lot of years, of course, right? So it'll be interesting to see what Sony does on year 2 as people are leaving their PS Now grandfathered plans, or also their prorate offerings as an existing subscriber, where now they will have to pay the full $120 to keep, you know, to keep Premium, $100 to keep Extra. So it'll definitely be interesting to see where they go from here. But to conclude, yeah, it's been, I mean, it's hard not to get your value out of either tier, to be honest. But what we can say undeniably is this is better than PlayStation Now. That's not saying much because the bar was so low, but it is much better than PS Now. It's not quite Game Pass, right? So we know Sony is not going to launch their games day one into a subscription tier, but we are seeing a 1.5, 2 year delay for their games going to it. So, you know, it was certainly meant to be a complimentary service for an engaged PlayStation customer. I would say year one has absolutely done that, and let's hope it continues to do so. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you haven't just yet, please consider subscribing for the best PlayStation news, reviews, and updates that are here on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at MysticRyan, and that is it. I will see you all in my next video. You take it easy.